Okay, so I'm going to tell you guys a little story about something that I did when I was a kid and learned one of the harshest lessons I've ever learned in my entire life. Okay, so the lesson that I learned at a young age is don't ever, ever, ever try to outsmart your parents. With that being said, we'll go back to when I was about 4 or 5 years old. Now, this story doesn't have a great lesson to be known, it's more of a comedic lesson, but it's just a story that'll always live with me, and I'll never forget what happened from it, so I might as well talk about it. But anyway, when I was young, probably around 4 to 6, I was really creative slash destructive as a kid. So one day, my brother was home and my grandmother was home. Well, my mom and my dad were outside working on the car. And as a 4 year old, I thought it would be a good idea to find me some new materials to paint with. But two things. I lacked the paint and then I lacked a canvas. So, with that being said, Shane, which is my brother, was asleep on the couch, and my grandmother was in another room. I don't quite remember what she was doing, but she didn't see me do any of this. Well, I walked up to the front door and locked my parents out. I don't know why. I don't know why I do the things that I did when I was 5. Well, anyway, so I went to the kitchen and got a bottle of Hershey's chocolate and strawberry syrup. That was my paint. Well, yeah, most of you probably know where this is going. And then I took it upon myself to paint on the walls because that was going to be my canvas. And what would be the worst thing that could possibly happen about that? Well, okay, so I started in the kitchen and made 2 laps around my entire house, lining the walls with chocolate syrup and strawberry syrup. Well, my mother peeks through the window because the door's locked and sees that the house is a red and brown disaster. So she starts beating on the door, finally wakes up my brother, and gets my grandmother's attention. And they finally unlock the door, and it's time for me to face judgment. And this is where the lesson comes into play at. So my dad was so angry at me he could not even see straight. So he let my grandmother take responsibility of how I should be disciplined. And if you're from around here, growing up, or if your parents were like mine, they strongly believe in using a hickory instead of their hand, for discipline. Nothing too bad, but it was bad enough that if you've ever been hit with a hickory, whatever you've done before to get hit, you'll never do it again. So, with that being said, grandmother told me to go outside and pick my hickory. Me as a kid thought I would bring her the biggest log possible. So I walked out of my yard, and I remember coming back with a handful of logs. I sat them down in front of my grandmother, and I said, pick one. And my grandmother said, oh, you think you're funny, huh? Well, she walks right out behind me and goes and gets the thinnest hickory that I have ever seen. And I told grandmother, I was like, no, grandmother, that's not going to hurt. Because in a 4-year-old, the smaller an object is, the more harmless it is. In my head. Well, I'm sure in some nights I can still see the red marks on the back of my leg that my grandmother left me that night for painting that house red and brown in chocolate and strawberry syrup. And I learned real quick, really, in a really harsh way, that no matter how old you get, and know how smart you think you are, you'll never be able to outthink your parents or your grandparents for that reason. They're your parents for a reason. They know you more than you think they do. And so here I was trying to pull fast on my grandmother and thinking everything was just going to be okay, and me learning a lesson that that's not quite how the world works, and I paid for it. Like I said, still probably should have bruises from that day, and it was a good 18 years ago. And I'm 23 years old, and anytime my grandmother tells me to go pick out a hickory, just kidding, I still shiver a little bit inside. So that's why I told this story, because it really hits home. Because for me to remember this when I was 5, pretty big deal, because I can barely remember what I had for lunch yesterday. But yeah, as far as lessons go, I learned right then and there that your parents were not to be messed with.